My name is Dustin Thomas. Been around here for, well, since I was 3, I guess. You might know my parents, or at least my dad. He owned the funeral homes here in Mount City and Pleasanton, West Coffin. And so, went to K-State, got a degree, Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering there, and now I'm in network engineer, cybersecurity stuff. So
Working from home.
work from home when I'm not out and about.
Yeah.
Working from home.
All right, gang, you know the drill. You need to know who we are. So you want to start, Sal?
Sure. I'm Jeff Hines. I live over just south and east of Parker.
Right.
Morgan Brown, we're on the state line over here.
Okay.
Charlene Sibbs, and I live north of Parker.
And we did a little introduction before the meeting, so I'll skip and go to Paul.
Paul Porter, and I live just outside of Lacine.
Elizabeth Staten. I live east of Pleasanton. I got a degree in geography from Pitt State.
Ed Anderson, just north of Lacey.
What was your first name? I'm sorry.
Pardon?
What was your first name?
Ed?
Ed.
David Fisher, just west of Centerville.
Emily Thies. We're part of the group that is here tonight. We live over off 52 where the solar panels are going to go.
Mark Briggs, 2 miles south of Fire.
And Dustin, I may state the obvious, but just to make sure we know these two these two and you two here were asked to join the commissioners of the planning and zoning. All the rest of the planning and zoning commissioners.
Okay.
And you two were selected because you were in favor of solar, and these two were picked so they would, as being opposed to solar, so we could bring some balance to moving forward. However we decide to do that.
Okay.
Rules for the guests. Most of the people I recognize and see here from earlier ones. This is a work session. There won't be any input from you. You're welcome to listen to everything we do and say, but unless we call you, we ask that you just take it all in and not speak because it's a work session. But there's been some times where we've asked somebody in the gallery for opinion, and if we do that, that's your license to say what you need to say to answer the question.
Can I ask a question? Because on Monday, Danny was saying that more people that have input, it's good. When he was talking about this meetings, if somebody has something that is important that they feel to say if they're for or against, if they pass this a note, can they speak if we ask?
I think that's up to us, this group, to decide how we want to do that. I guess my thoughts would be, if you had somebody you wanted to speak, tell us who it is and why. We'll do a quick head nod, either no or yes, and move from there. And if we agree, or there's not a consensus, but a majority of people who want to hear from that person, I think that'd be okay. So I'm looking for heads nodding or waving.
I'm okay with that, provided they want to speak about the regulation that we're discussing and not have a discussion about a proposed site that hasn't been proposed yet.
Gotcha. All right. Okay, seems like we're on the same page with that. So that's the easy stuff. The hard part now for us is the Board of Commissioners meeting was yesterday. Seems like it's been a long week. And Mark spoke at that meeting, and it caused the commissioners, Board of Directors, commissioners to pause, and probably will, and for so many of you who watched it online, cause for pause. But Mark, you kind of want to, in a Reader's Digest version, say what you told the commissioners.
Yeah, so basically, I feel like there's been a lot of lost communication between the commissioners and this board. I think sometimes they say one thing, and then they expect other things, and I want a clarification on that. And I know a lot, when I've been to commissioners meetings and talked to them, it was about county input. And I felt like we weren't doing county input here because I feel like they kind of directed you guys just to look at the regulations, so I want a clarification on that. So I guess by the end of a hour-long discussion with them and walking in circles a lot, we figured out that that is the truth. They do want some county input on this also, so. I think Darren's gonna set up, a time at Prairie View, roughly 30 days out.
We hope for you.
Right, it's
Someplace bigger.
granting approval and so on. And there will be a time that the public will be able to come and speak and say if they do or don't want this for their county. Darren said they'd have roughly 2 minutes, I think, and that's kind of the gist of it.
And what wasn't really decided, I had a conversation with Jason Hightower, the chair of the commissioners, this afternoon, and I said, what's the direction you want us to go? And he said, Rich, we didn't take a vote. We didn't really come to a consensus on that. So the big issue for us tonight, I believe, is figuring out what we do as a subgroup for the rest of our time, whether that's a short period or a long period. Mark, you had said that what you were pushing for was a year-long moratorium. Am I getting that right?
I think we just wanted a moratorium in general until we could get the county input and go over the regulations both.
Okay.
So I don't really care on the time frame of how long it is or how short it is, as long as we can get all that accomplished in that time.
Okay, all right. So I had proceeded down a path where I thought what the commissioners really wanted was us to review all the code and make it better to our liking. I'm not sure that's really what we need to do. And I guess that's up for discussion. Where do we go from here? I don't want to spend another 4 or 5 sessions on this if it's not going to be used at all. I mean, it's just a waste of our time to do that if that's not what we end up doing. So,
Rich, not to interrupt you. Yesterday when I was at the podium with Mark, I asked the commission to set up a public forum for them to speak.
right.
But to move forward with going through the regulations, and they all 3 said yes.
Okay. I've talked to 2 or 3 people since that meeting, and I'm not sure everybody heard that same thing.
I think that's what they said.
So, what'd you hear?
That's what I heard. Let's find a way to get more public input. We're trying to do with this forum. Initially, it was pretty specific. They sent back Article 14 for us to review. I think that's going back in December or maybe before that. That was very specific. It was Article 14 that we were supposed to review. Then after listening to the meeting on Monday, the impression I got is what Darren has, that we need to find a way to get more public input. We can with that forum, or some discussion about surveys or votes, advisory votes or whatever, to get a total view of the county, but that we should continue to hammer out the regulations.
Okay.
Now, that's the way I interpret it.
All right.
Without having heard any of the comments from the meeting, I think it would be difficult to ask fellow residents of the county to form an educated opinion unless we have given them the opportunity to look at regulations that have been thoroughly gone through. And so obviously an excellent starting point was bringing that expert in from Topeka to help draft these. To this point in time, I feel like the changes we made have been pretty small in nature, but have been solid recommendations that have found some middle road. And so if we really want some solid input from people that don't already have their mind made up because solar energy is either evil or going to save the planet, for the people left somewhere in the middle, they can't make a decision unless we thoroughly go through these regulations and put our best foot forward by trying to make sure that we have a plan that can be successful if the county chooses to move forward.
Yeah.
So what happened, so we were talking about the wind ban, so to speak, when the prohibition for wind, after the meeting in April, and the regulations were, I believe, available at the time of the meeting based on some of the emails that I've seen. They weren't voted on by the commission, but they had pretty much been gone through for the first time. So everybody came into the meeting and everybody talked about, I don't want solar, or I don't want wind, I don't want wind. And it just, after that meeting, wind went away. And the regulations had been worked on up until that point. So if we had a meeting and it went the same way, and there was tons of people that came out and said, no solar, no solar, that doesn't shut the process down, does it?
No.
But it shut it down for wind.
The finding of facts could be different though, I mean,
So,
the county.
sorry, Martha. So on the wind, we did write a set of regulations for wind. We went through the whole process, and then Mr. Calp wrote a prohibition, and we presented both articles to the county commissioners, and they made the decision. So we did go through the whole process of writing a regulation for wind.
But during in the workshops, you didn't go through those regulations like you did solar. There was regulations written by COP, and I wasn't part of the committee. I was sitting in the gallery observing it, and from what I observed, you did not go through the specific wind regulations. There was some regulations out there that were presented by COP, but they were never vetted by the committee. Is that how you remember it, Paul?
Yes, but the difference in the two, in my recollection, is the hinge point is the survey. Because the results of the survey were more compelling for the wind than they were for the solar. And so, if my recollection is accurate, there was a public sentiment against, but there was also data. And we know from further discussion that the comprehensive plan statistics on the solar have been vague and confusing from other discussions that we've had. That to me is where we went left instead of right. And then we didn't feel like there was a compelling argument at the time, and somebody jump in. And just for the record also, all of us need to understand we've had about 50% turnover in this group since we started this process 2 years ago. And the continual re-education of everybody is crazy. That's just like, so forgive me for like treating us like second graders, because half of us weren't here. So the hinge point was the survey. And I thought about this a lot, if you can tolerate me for a couple minutes. Planning and zoning has 5 things that they need to drive their decision-making process. Public opinion, the regulations, the staff findings, the Supreme Court, Kansas Supreme Court, Golden versus Board of Education, and the comprehensive plan.
Over the board.
Oh, yeah, Board of Education. Sorry, I went a little peek on us. So those 5 things drive our decisions. And with the grayness of the survey and the comprehensive plan, we didn't have guidance there apart from the rural county stuff, like we did for wind. And for all those pieces to line up, we ended up making regulations. So if we talk about a survey or a referendum, in my opinion, that's a missing piece for us, Because with that piece of data, we know what we don't know from the comprehensive plan, and then all of our ducks line up in our decision-making process. Darren's staff findings don't come into play, and the golden rules don't come into play until we actually have a CUP. So we need these other pieces. We need that information, in my opinion. And that's why, Richard was making that appeal at the meeting yesterday. So that's a long answer to your question, but to me, we went right instead of left, or left instead of right, based on what we were getting out of the comprehensive plan. And I'll just leave that there.
Yeah.
I guess I do have a question.
Okay.
So I feel like we've gotten along great, common ground. We've done great with that. Jason had stated in there, well, when you're going over these regulations, why aren't you supporting evidence that show a prohibition because of that reason? But to not be a jerk to everyone in this room every time we say a sentence, I don't want to be like that. And I wonder legally, and this is probably more of a you guys question, is it smart for us? We already have a base set of regulations, and we do have the survey. There's been other things presented where there's quite a bit of more public knowledge with that as far as other meetings and everything else. Is it legally right for us to continue to work on these, knowing that the county input may be different? I don't know. Does that make sense? Like, I don't want it to be like, well, you guys went ahead and made the regulations, even though you thought there was a chance of not having it or something like that. I'm just wondering legally, we do have other people that watch this video and sit in this room of what the smart choice is. Does that make sense, Darren?
My understanding is the county commissioners can send back an article to planning and zoning at any time.
And basically, that's what they've done.
Right.
To add to what Paul said, my recollection during the time that we were dealing with the wind issue, the survey pointed out that it was not a popular option. The groundswell in-person support for banning wind was pretty evident, and so we took that lead and we developed what I would call highly regulated code for that, but then ended up just saying we're just ban it together. Then we started working on solar, and again, I would characterize what we've got now, what we're working on, is highly regulated. I mean, it's really highly regulated, and that's what we really asked CALP to do, and he did it, and we tweaked that and got that done. But the surveying on solar was much different. I looked this up earlier today. We had 558 respondents to the survey. 37.63% said they were favorable. 37.63. Not favorable, 27.96. So about 10% less wanted. No opinion, there was 14.16%, and those that needed more information were 20.25. So it was really, I can remember thinking about that. Well, we just don't have a clear direction where we want to go. Then we went into the public hearing that we had up in Prairie View, the Lacine, and there's only one person that got up and spoke against solar. And if my recollection is right, it was about how much noise they were going to make. Well, a lot of us members had already visited a site where we saw solar panels, and they make a click every 5 minutes as they adjust to the sun. And that's it. You wouldn't be able to hear that from 100 yards away. So it didn't get much traction, and we went ahead and worked on code that was highly regulated, but probably wasn't going to be a ban. And that's what we ended up with what the Planning and Zoning Commission. There was one person missing that night, and so it was 8-0 to pass that code. We had one member that wasn't there. It had been 9-0. I can't say that. It was 8-0.
Right.
And then the commissioners, we took it to the commissioners, and they voted 3-0 to accept it. So we thought this thing was really pretty much put to bed until afterwards, and that's where you folks started raising questions. We're like, we just went through this 6-month process, didn't hear a word, and we got it all done, but now we got opposition.
Right.
When you got the survey back and you felt that it was a little vague and you weren't sure, was there any attempt to get additional information out to the public as far as what you meant by solar? Or, because I don't know that it was, we want to put 4,000 to 8,000 acres of solar farms in here versus solar on your home type stuff.
My recollection is no, because we didn't see that need.
Yeah, that's the way I remember it. We felt like you brought forth that you didn't think the survey was accurate in the way it asked about solar, and I think we recognize that now. But in listening, back then, the feeling was we had good questions in there.
Right.
And we're recognizing now that maybe they weren't. And then, as Richard said, that was backed up by when they did, and I wasn't part of the committee, put the regulations out and asked for people, public comment, who didn't get a big pushback. So the committee's sitting there going, okay, we think everything's in line here. The survey doesn't really come out and speak against solar. We've asked for public comment. We're not getting a lot of kickback. And then when it all came to light, you guys now on Paul's 5 points, now public opinion's different than what the committee thought it was at the time.
Well, speaking for myself, I mean, I always thought I was somewhat informed. Obviously, we weren't informed enough as far as following the stuff that we are following now. But we found out about it like the 30th of June and went to the July 3rd meeting to find out what can we do, because we just found out about it. And then it's just been this big roll of people calling and meeting you and saying, there's still people that don't know anything about it. But we've talked to the commissioners about having better alternative ways of getting information out to the citizens in Linn County. I don't know that they've necessarily implemented anything yet, but we've had those conversations.
Yeah, we've had that with them too. So
They've made investments to,
Yeah.
I don't think you've seen it yet, but they've made investments to improve
Yeah,
communication. That's a very good point.
Yeah.
And I think they took it to heart.
yeah.
So hearing that the county commissioners want public input, and rightfully so, I mean, this is a big decision for our county. We need to hear from the residents. Having a public forum, there's not a worse option to gain accurate and actionable information that reflects the entire opinion of the county. So working in education, we measure or gauge the public opinion on a regular basis, and it's important to our work just like it is here. One of the things that I found out is if you want quality information that truly is representative of any group that you want to survey, it cannot be opt-in. Cannot be opt-in. And a public forum is the worst of an opt-in because of the nature of how people feed off of each other, whether for or against. I would be saying this if I said on the other side of the issue. I'm pretty much right in the middle on this. And so if they want actionable information, they need to hire an organization that does a phone call survey and gets a cross section of the entire county, rather than hearing from one pocket of the county that is adamantly against it, which is what we have right now.
So would you advocate that in addition to the public hearing?
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with hearing from people in person. You won't get the best information to reflect everyone's opinion. And so, you know, the statistics you pointed out just a little bit ago, 20% of the people said they need more information, which is why I think it's important to get these regulations right and in front of people. And the other 14% don't have an opinion. Well, what would cause them to have an opinion? Part of it could be reading the regulations. Part of it could be hearing concerns from other residents in the county and saying, oh, maybe this isn't a good idea. Or 8,000 acres is too much, but 4 or 2,000 does make sense to me. I want to start small and then I'm willing to grow it if it works. But we don't know that because we don't have that information yet.
Darren, do you want to say something? I thought maybe I heard you.
No, I was
Oh,
going to
David.
refer back to Dave with the wind, and you are correct. Because when I presented the regulations, I presented the prohibition and told them that was a set of regulations that was written, and they asked to see that before they made a decision. Because they tabled it twice, I think, once or twice, before they voted.
But the regulations were never vetted by the committee.
Right.
Tell me more about your survey and how you get that done.
Sure. So there are lots of companies that do that for a living. You tell them the kinds of things you want to learn the public's opinion about, and they run an algorithm. They figure out how many phone calls need to be made, the demographic makeup of the county in terms of the age groups, so that you're not just randomly calling 200 people. You want so many in this age group, so many in that age group, as reflected in the general population. And of course, the whole geography of the county would be taken into account too. So what we found after, and you get a big, thorough, detailed report. Of course, there's a cost associated with that. It gives you good information. We did a survey recently that I helped send out, and it was amazing when we collected email addresses, how many people were on there filling it out multiple times. That's what's wrong with opt-in surveys in particular.
Jeff,
Yeah.
do you have an idea about how much that costs?
I'm spitballing here, but I think it was around 20,000. So, I don't know what the county's budget is. I know what the school district's budget is. 20,000 sounds like a lot if it's in your household, but in a multi-million-dollar budget, it's not if you're making a really important decision.
And I would make that argument. I mean, this is really important stuff.
It is.
I mean, think of the people who have been holding this whole thing near and dear to their heart for so long. 20,000 is pretty cheap.
No doubt. Whether you're for or against it or caught in the middle,
Right.
you want to get it right.
Yeah.
As far as the phone survey, so it's randomly selecting people.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't like that because everybody in the county wouldn't have a say in it. At least if it was an open forum or we did a referendum vote, like you said, everyone does have their opinion to be able to say.
But in the world, now, I have a research degree, and it's been 40 years since I did that degree. But if you pick your sample correctly, it will tell you what the larger population believes on you always hear this say on a basis of error 2.5% either way. That's usually what they do. But they figure out who the random people are that represent the larger population, and they can prove to you statistically that the information is valid. And that's what they do with the presidential elections and all that stuff. So,
Well, as far as the referendum, well, let me back up. The comprehensive, you had 550 people respond, roughly on the solar question. Throughout this process, we've acquired about 1,200 signatures of people in the county that do not want it. So, I mean,
Who did they learn about it from?
we've set booths up.
What kind of information did you present?
Just everything that we had. We had pictures, we had information,
With the goal of?
giving them information. Do they want this in their backyard? And some people would sign it. Some people were for it. I'm not going to say that there aren't any people out there that aren't for it. But yeah, and there's still people that are reaching out to us and saying, what do I need to do? I work the elections, and the last election we had, people were coming in. I've never met them before. They said, where do we vote on solar? I'm like, sorry, it's not on here. So, I mean, the interest is out there.
But it shows how informed they are about it. If they're coming to vote on something, they don't even realize it's.
That's true. But I mean, I wasn't informed until it was going around 3 sides of my property. And so I trust me, I know more about solar than I've ever wanted to know about.
I don't mean this as a personal attack. I'm just curious because a couple people that spoke the night that everyone was here at the zoning and planning meeting was they felt like they hadn't been notified. When's the appropriate time to notify them? I mean, a conditional use permit hasn't even been applied for.
The county standards is once it's issued, then they notify.
Right.
And you have, I think it's 20 days. And then there's other things that go into play. I don't know. If I had been notified 3 years ago when everybody was signing up their land, I would have been much more informed 3 years ago than I am right now.
Sure.
So,
I think to your survey, which, I appreciate the hard work versus a conditioned survey or something from the polls. It just has to do from the county's perspective of due diligence.
Mhm.
And so if we initiate something and we hire it done or do a poll, then we put that in our files, and if and when our regulations are challenged in some form or another, that has due diligence written on it. And if we just say, that kind of gets back to my 5 bullet points in that your survey is a measure of public opinion, but it's effectively a straw poll in contrast to an actual election where there's a legal machine going on. And I would say the same thing for a survey that we commissioned via the county paying for it. It's all the lawyers. So that in the end, the county's I's and T's are dotted and crossed, that we did everything we could to get all the input we can, because a scientific poll or something that goes through the official machine of an election is something that a court is going to look at and understand. Is from the county's perspective. And this is, I'm not a lawyer, you know, so that this is all just kind of an opinion, but that to me would be the difference. I'm not discounting the opinion of the people that you have on your survey.
Oh,
It's just
I'm not offering up that, but I'm just explaining
County
there are.
can't say yes and amen to the survey and leave this blank over here in regard to having hard data.
Well, whenever the county has a petition, somebody's turned in about something, it has to have notarized, it has to be handed out by certain people. It can't just be laid somewhere and left there. You know, it has to be sort of passed out, you know, by,
And the signatures get
and the signatures get.
double checked and it's.
Seems like every time an advisory vote comes up with the county commissioners, the number one concern is the cost. Because you can't run it. It's very difficult to run it concurrently with another election. It's got to be a separate voting booth or separate ballot. Run it by itself, and it's costly. The cost that I've heard, David, I've heard him say 2 or 3 times, it costs about $14,000 to run a separate ballot. So if you're talking 14,000 versus 20, and you're allowing the whole county to weigh in on it, I think the commissioners might lean towards a vote versus a survey. And as far as getting, to me, I mean, a vote would be more meaningful, despite all the analytics and algorithms and everything else.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree, David, on that. I mean, wise people differ. I think the scientific survey would probably render us better information. But again, that's just a difference of opinion.
Well, there's been polls that have been wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Elections.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True. I'm just
So that's what I think of when I think of a survey. Not that they're wrong, not that they're not right sometimes.
on the survey, how do they get the phone numbers? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I can't speak intelligently to that. Before our Board of Education decided to contract with them, they came and did a very thorough presentation. They highlighted the process that they would use to conduct the survey, as well as what the information would look like. And our board agreed to move forward with that. They made the phone calls, they generated the report 60 days later, whatever it was. And we got like a 10 to 20 page document that had the results disaggregated in so many ways that make your head spin. It was really good information. The ultimate test in our country is an election. Always has been, probably always will be. I would tend to agree with you, though, that I think we would get better information in so much as you are going to get a true cross-section, not just individuals that have the time, ability, or interest to go to the election polls.
Yeah.
I just think with doing that, you're not giving every citizen their chance to give their 2 cents. And I think,
On a scientific survey.
yeah, I think the other thing is and not trying to offend anybody here, but the commissioners had already suggested we do the open forum at Prairie View. So I guess I'm a little bit wondering of why we're sidetracked from that. And that's what you guys did with the wind also.
Well, I don't think we're sidetracked a lot. To me, that's a given. Yeah. In fact, I've done this, said this a few times already, finding the common ground on this. It seems like we need to have a public forum, and we're already working on that, but we need to have either a referendum or a scientific study done. And I think I think that's where we're at. We figure out which one we really want to go with. Then we've got some, I think we're all kind of on the same page of what we need to do.
I mean, Rich, I think the scientific study would be the way to go. We'll get an outside party in here that doesn't have a dog in the fight and get some information from them.
Yeah.
Move on from there.
Well, Danny McCullough made a comment up here yesterday, said, the young people in our county, this is not an issue for them. They don't care because they're just too young in their career to really care about that. They're trying to figure out how to get the babysitters all lined out for the next whatever. So I think he's got a little bit right that if you had a referendum like I was advocating yesterday, you might miss an important segment of the county that a scientific survey would get. And they're not perfect, but they're over the long haul. You look at it all. The ones that were wrong stand out, but my gosh, they get it right a lot more often than not.
Two follow-up comments. Number one, I'm not opposed. I want to be on the record saying I am not opposed to having a forum or a town hall meeting.
Yeah.
I just think there's a better way to get information. And the second thing is, I hope that when the individuals speak, this would be a suggestion I hope could get to the commissioners, is that they take the name and address from the people that choose to speak that night. Because I think what we are likely to find is that it's from a very specific area within the county.
I disagree because we're getting calls from people all over the county.
That very well way play out. And so if we collect the addresses, we'll know that.
I think no matter what, you're gonna get a higher percentage out of that area, but I think
For sure.
the outside the area will still be shocking.
Well, I think we've reached consensus that we need to have a public forum. That's already underway. It's ready to go. The question is, do we want a survey or do we want a referendum vote?
My thoughts on the referendum vote is if you make it to be a special election, not coinciding with another reason people are already driving to the polls, you're going to get the same thoughts and opinions as you would in a public forum, because it's going to be the people that are most passionate about that are going to get out of their house and go down there, versus a survey is going to be more diverse in its population that it's going to get. I think that would be a risk that you would run by having it as a special election. If you did it with another election that already had people going to the polls, it's probably going to be a broader section of the community. But even then, our voter turnout is embarrassing low. So as a nation, right, not just us, I'm just saying as a nation, we have the right to vote and we don't use it. And, if we're trying to look at what everybody feels, then maybe especially a separate vote is not the best way to get that information. It is going to, ultimately, that would be the most legal way as far as knowing democratic way, I should say, but it might not be the best way to get the
So
higher.
I guess where I'm at with this whole thing is this something we need to decide tonight, or do we want to park it and think it over and talk to people and come back next week?
Well, if we're gonna make a recommendation to the county commissioners, it has to be from the planning committee.
Yeah.
That's right.
So
That's right.
we can talk about it all we want here.
Yeah, whatever we do here is non-binding.
We've got to take that to the planning committee and got it through the planning committee and then make the recommendation.
And they won't meet until next month. Unless we somehow decide to make up the meeting we missed last night because of the snow.
13.
Paul, the 5 tenets that you outlined earlier that a zoning and planning group should use to make a decision, are those considered of equal importance, or is one supposed to be more important than the other?
In your opinion.
I think it's all, well, Golden versus Overland Park is law. I mean, that's a Kansas Supreme Court ruling. But that's only going to come into play when an actual conditional use permit is being discussed, along with Darren's staff findings. Those kind of go hand in hand, but they're two different things. So that's not going to come up until there's an actual conditional use permit. it's kind of, I'm sorry you didn't hear the meeting, but it's kind of what, David mentioned. Yes, those things are important, but there's other things to consider as well. It's just all thrown in a pot and taken, because you may have, very clear regulations, but a particular situation that's like, well, we need to make some allowances here for this situation. And I don't know that I can give you a definitive answer. They all just get thrown into the pot. But what I'm concerned now, from my reading, I'm not a lawyer, of Kansas statutes, cruising online, finding Kansas statutes, and how binding a comprehensive plan is, it's loosely binding. It's meant to be a guide. It can't, if you have it, it can't be ignored.
Is that this?
No, the big comprehensive plan, the big colorful thing, the 25-year comprehensive. If you have it, it can't be ignored. It's a guide, it's not a law. That's Paul's non-lawyer interpretation.
The reason I have public opinion is one of the tenants, and so obviously
Yeah.
it's an important component.
And
If I were asked that question, I'd say it's in the eye of the beholder. You got 5 things there and they're all important, but how they rank is in the eye of the beholder. I would differ from Paul, and Paul would differ from Charlene.
But they all 5 have to work together to make some kind of a decision
Right.
ultimately.
I have a question for you guys. You guys may or may not know this, but on the Golden versus Overland Park findings, and I know everything you guys, a lot of what you guys do is kind of based on that. Have there been any discussion of the findings out of the Wabunsee County case? Just because it was tested, and I've read where some areas that's kind of been used as the facts because it's a renewable source. I'm not quite educated enough on this to sound very smart at it, but it sounded like it had been used in the court of law some, that they're changing the Golden versus Overland Park facts, and instead of using those rulings of some more of the Zimmerman County Commissioners who wants to go bounce the county. Just curious if anybody else has heard that.
I haven't, but David, or Darren, have you?
Okay.
Wait, well, Muncie County was the landowners suing the county, not, let's say, a company doing that.
Well, I understand that.
I don't know. It's notes on it. I can't find it.
I can print out a couple things I'd read, and I was more not trying to change your guys' opinion on any of it. I was just wondering if it had been brought to anybody's attention.
So back to where we're trying to make some progress tonight. We've decided that the open forum is a good idea. It's underway, it's scheduled. The question is, do we go for a referendum or a scientific study? And my question to you all was, do you want some time to think about that, or do we need to figure out which way we want to go tonight?
So I found the survey or the study that I was talking about. I just emailed it to Darren because I thought you have all of our email addresses. It'd be easy for you to share that out with everybody. I think you make a pretty good decision based on however many pages is in this. It's really long.
This is the one you commissioned.
Correct. Just show you what, if the county commissioners decided to put forth a survey, what kind of data would be given back, how it's broken down. It actually talks about how the data is acquired, et cetera.
Well, I would be for finishing going through the regulations, having the public meeting, because we need to go through those before we do that, and also doing the scientific study.
And what was that last part?
Doing the scientific study.
I would agree with that because we're going to need to, at very least, update the regulations no matter what we do. Either we do it now or we do it later. Might as well do it now while we have everyone gathered. And go for. I don't particularly have an opinion on whether it's a scientific survey or an election. They both have their good points and bad points, and so I don't really know enough about it to really have an opinion. I took one statistics class in my life, so.
I guess so. Everybody knows where I stand. I don't mind going through the regulations. I still think, I don't like a scientific study just because I, on Monday, spent an hour discussing this with the commissioners. I think everybody needs a voice. And I don't think with a scientific study, you give everyone a voice. I think it gives a selected random amount of people a voice. That's just my 2 cents.
So you'd like to have a vote countywide
Yeah, it wouldn't bother me.
where we are going to get a turnout of 20 to 35%.
That's whoever
I,
participates.
that's speculation. I think this is a big enough issue. You cannot really put a number on it. You don't know what you're gonna get. But I think it's a big enough issue within the county. You're gonna get more, you'd be surprised how many you get.
What did you say, sir?
I said they could be lucky to get 50. Myself,
50 votes or 50%?
50%.
Oh, okay.
I guess I'm just really confused on the study. So it's a random selection, a random selection of county residents. And then it uses a algorithm.
Algorithm.
Those are my votes, yes.
Yeah. So I don't, you're trusting a lot in electronics on that. But I think the whole reason that this is even brought up is that I talked to the commissioner so much to get the county's input that everyone needs to be able to have their voice. And I feel like that doesn't give everyone their voice. It gives you a random selection of the citizens and then basically molds it into shape.
I would say it gives you a representative sample of the voters. They use the term in statistics, stratified random sample. They go through stratifications of the population, and they with every stratification, they pick a random number out of that stratification.
So, but with today's current technology, and I know that, I mean, I'll get surveys from the RNC. I don't answer them. There's a lot of spam and robo calls and all of that. So I could possibly get a phone call from that and I might not even know or answer it because I don't know what this is.
So that's accounted for at the very least. So if the county commissioners want to consider this, they're going to hopefully invite somebody down like the Board of Education where I'm employed did, and they're going to sit through a discussion, and someone skeptical sitting in the audience like myself that night was left being able to, I strongly supported the concept after it was over. I didn't get a vote, but I liked it, but I had no opinion prior to that because I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah.
So there's no way for us to say, but it accounts for people not answering the phone call. I didn't know that because I was like, man, I'd be mad if I didn't answer the phone. I want to be heard on this. So,
And ultimately, it's gonna be the commissioner's decision.
I was going to just say that, David.
right.
So.
One of the things we could do, they pushed a lot of stuff back to us, and we've taken it on. But you know, we might push back to the three commissioners and say, "Here's what we got. You decide.
Yeah.
It's your call."
I think that's a valid approach, because ultimately it's gonna be, they're the ones that are gonna have to be sold on.
That's right.
And they're going to have to pay for it one way or the other. So
Right.
let's just let them hash it out like we've tried to do, but their vote counts. I'm seeing heads nod.
Yeah, I
We okay with that?
Yeah, go ahead. We'll need
Send it to the
something,
commissioners and let them decide which one.
Well, I think,
regular meeting. We can't do anything until the regular.
We can't, yeah.
no, so I think what I'm hearing here is when we, at our next committee meeting, our official meeting,
Right. Which you said is on the 13th,
I believe it's February 13th.
February 13th.
we're gonna make a recommendation to vote on, sending back to the commissioners an option of a survey or a vote.
Right. And then after that, Darren will present to the commissioners and they'll have to wrestle with it.
Right. I agree with that.
Well, we'll tackle that on the 13th when we're in our official meeting. Okay. All right. Are we okay with that? Ready to move on? So the next question is, do we continue to work on the tweaks to the code we have, or do we pause?
I say we continue. you know, we're already here. We already took time out of our evenings.
I'm committed to reviewing them. That's what the group wants to do.
I'm neutral. We've got, it's not just tonight. We've got, 5 or 6 more Wednesday nights.
Yeah.
Hate to do that. And
You know, for me, if it's throwaway work, I don't want to do that. I don't want to waste my time if it's just stuff we throw away at the end. I'll just tell you, that's where I feel about it.
I
yeah,
agree. I agree. We're already here. We can discuss anything we want, but I think as moving forward, I think if you say 5 or 6, I think it could turn into 5 or 6 or 10.
Yeah.
And I express this, but right now my kids are wrestling. I shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to miss it for nothing.
Right.
That's all. And I'm not saying this isn't important, because it is. But I'm just saying if we don't know which direction we are going, we all have things to do.
Yeah.
And I don't want it.
Mark, am I right? There's a 1-year moratorium in place right now.
Correct.
Okay. So the work that we thought we were tasked with completing isn't terribly urgent.
Wait a minute. Is there a 1-year moratorium in
Yes.
place?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, yeah, up to a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Up to-
Which-
Not a year, but up to a year.
Which they could change at any.
I think
Right.
it was December 31st of this year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to make sure we don't have throwaway work, I think those are both your words. I mean, there is an urgency. So if the commissioners want to hear from people at a public forum and whether or not they want to do a survey or not, they can make those decisions before we reconvene.
But do you think we should have the regulations gone back over before we go to the open forum? So
I think it's, I see your point, Richard. I mean, I guess I'm disappointed with all the homework I did for tonight. But we need to know which direction we're going. Then, what comes first, chicken or the egg? Well, we need to know what direction the county commissioners are going, what people of the county feel, no matter how they try to find it out. Then we hash out the regulations.
Do have one thing to bring up. So last meeting, we went over some things. I do have something I want to speak about that. Means it's all fresh with everybody. We want to talk about it, or we want to just wait if we're going to postpone this when we'll start fresh again.
Let's see if we can come to some kind of agreement on what we're going to do with the code in the near term. And David,
Oh, sorry. Was Dick, somebody was-
go ahead,
I
Darren.
can wait.
No, go ahead.
So I feel like that if I don't say this, I'm not doing my job. Monday, I specifically asked if we were supposed to move forward with going through the regulations and have a public forum, and they all said yes. So if you want to hold off, that's fine. I'll take that back to them Monday and see what their response is. But I feel like if I didn't say that, I'm not doing my job.
I don't think we're saying we're not, we're just not saying when.
Yeah.
We could go to once a month instead of, and we're shooting ourselves in the foot at that, but I'm just saying, it's not that we're not gonna do it.
That's great.
Charlene, what's your opinion? You're one of the longtime members of this committee.
well, I said, I think we should go through the regulations and finish them up before we go to the public forum so that we know where we stand when people ask questions about the regulations. So I don't think we should have the public forum until we finish that. That's my opinion.
Big question, is that doable?
To get it done.
To get it done before?
30 days.
I think it's that much. If we work on it for 2.5 hours every week, I think we should get it done pretty quickly. It's not that much.
I just thought before, so when you guys did the public forum originally, you guys actually had the regulations before you did them, because.
Yep.
Really? Because I asked that to Commissioners, and they said no, because financially it wouldn't make sense.
No, it was all
It was done. It was done.
Did you?
And that was the whole point, is to have those ready to go.
Did
So
you?
I guess the only public input you had, I'm just trying to be clear on all of it. So before you guys actually started on the regulations, you had the comp plan. And,
And there was 3 meetings on the comp plan, so there's public input on that.
okay. So then
And a survey.
That's right.
you had the survey, but then you built the regulations, and then you had the other open forum.
And Mark, during that time, some weeks we were meeting 3 times a week, and some of those went 4 hours a night. I mean, we worked hard, and they were all announced, and they were all open meetings. Anybody could attend and listen as we went through that thing, and that was laborious. Boy, those are tough. Those are tough times.
Oh,
Most of those meetings, though, David was pretty much the only one that showed up.
Oh, I wasn't the only.
You were the most consistent.
Some people would-
But he wasn't allowed to speak at those.
Right.
Oh, right. I didn't see it there.
Okay, I've heard a couple of people strongly say they want to continue working on the regulations. That seems to be the prevailing thought in the room.
Also, Rich, I don't have any kids to take care of. I am pretty much free. So if you guys want to move to once a month, once every other week, I don't think my opinion should be taken that heavy.
Rich, what you could do is try to cover what you wanted to cover at night, and then take it back to the commissioners and say, here's where we are. Give me some clear direction.
I can do that. Okay,
I think Jeff makes a really good point. We've got, got a moratorium in place. It's not like it has to be done tomorrow.
all right, let's finish what we decided last week, we'll get done tonight. And then I'll go to the commissioners, Darren and I'll go to the commissioners together and seek further direction on this thing. We okay with that? All right.
All right, my question is, I know we talked about this, we can bounce back at any time, but while it's fresh on everybody's mind, I had something I want to bring up about last week's meeting, a topic.
Okay,
We want to hit on it.
sure.
Okay. So I know on the total acreage cap, we spoke about it, and I think we came up with something we thought was a bad idea. I do have one thing that does concern me with that. So I wasn't quite prepared enough for last week's meeting, I'm not gonna lie. Work turned into be a booger and I didn't get all my homework done. The largest that I can find today, the largest solar field farm in the state of Kansas is 144 acres. So I think for us to then turn around and do the acreage cap at 4,000 seems pretty wild. To know what's on the ground is 144 acres.
There's proposed ones up in Douglas County. I think Johnson County is 2,000 acres, maybe 2,500 acres.
Panasonic.
And these are major cities that have a lot of people in them. And down here, we don't.
Does proximity to a population base matter if you can hook into the grid?
No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about as far as oversight and management and
Oh.
people available to do something like
That
that.
makes sense.
Yeah.
I didn't know where you're going with
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay.
So that concerned me more than anything else. You know, and to be completely honest, I don't know how much we're supposed to talk about here, but so I reached out to, it was Stanton County, which is on the very west side of the state. Reached out and, I called a couple of their commissioners, only ended up speaking to one. The other one didn't call me back yet. But, I think it's been there since 2000, or 2020, 2021, somewhere in there. I was very curious of the pilot program and what they received for funding on something like that. I know it's not really big in acres, but just to do somewhat of a comparison. And they've actually lost money due to the pilot program because they actually got reimbursed $0 from the pilot program. And,
What went awry on the reimbursement?
well, they're in negotiations for the pilot program. I guess they had let them start construction.
Oh, they didn't sign.
And from my understanding, it was like I think, and this is all come from him, so none of it's like complete data, but from my understanding, it was like a local co-op, like similar to Heartland, from my understanding, that wanted to do this. They said they were investing $20 million to put it in, and so they didn't want to pay a lot up front. And so they were negotiating with the county to pay more later in the 10-year term. and basically just walked away and never called them back and wouldn't acknowledge them. They seeked, were gonna seek legal or talk to legal, and they just didn't want to throw good money and bad money to themselves. That's all I've gotten to. I mean, I haven't been able to reach out to any others. I was gonna call the other states even just to see, because I'm very intrigued by that.
Mark, did you ask them if they had zoning regulations?
I don't believe they do.
They don't.
Yeah, I don't believe they do. So,
I don't see that happening here.
I'm not saying that's gonna happen here, but I think sometimes you gotta watch it. I've read a lot about it. I've never gotten a perfect data of how it works.
As I understand the spirit of what the state law they passed on this was that there's a 10-year period, first 10 years of the deal, and it was negotiable between whatever company they were working with and the commissioners. And it's not a done deal until they all, both parties sign off on it. And the idea was, let's incentivize this so there's real payoff for the county, and it's something that the companies can still afford to offer. So, I mean, to me, that's the spirit of what they were trying to do. And the fact that you don't have to spend it on schools or property here, property there, you can spend it however the commissioners decide to spend it, really makes it a very good incentive for the county
Right.
to work out a favorable deal.
Right. So the whole pilot program was just kind of a side talk about that. I guess my biggest deal is I still think the acreage of what we were allowing is pretty wild. When the biggest known solar farm in the state of Kansas right now is 144 acres.
Yeah,
I think
but that's just one farm. I mean, there could be several farms.
So we don't have a limit, size of a particular farm, right?
Right.
Should we consider that? If the largest one's 144, they're talking about some that are more than that. No, the Kansas, the suggested statute says 500 acres.
500 numbers in
I don't mind that as long as there is a clause for the county commissioners to make an exception. And when I spoke to the big commission group that night, one of the things that I really wanted to focus on was lay of the land. There may be a particular area where the lay of the land allows a massive place to be built and not infringe on the property rights of neighbors. Is that likely? Probably not. But it's still something that ought to be provided for. I love the concept of setting a maximum acreage, though, if that provision.
Isn't this an aggregate of all farms, not
It
just
is.
in the
That is
individual?
correct.
Right? And just from quick math that I did, 8,000 acres is 2% of Linn County.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
It doesn't seem an atrocious amount to say this is our max for now until we reevaluate whether it's a good thing for the county or not.
So something we talked about at our last meeting was whether or not 8,000 was the right. And the consensus of the group was a recommendation to start at 4,000 to evaluate how things go after the first conditional use permit is approved. And it's up and running. You've seen the construction phase, you know what tax revenue or pilot dollars have been settled on. And when you have some real data from our county, the commissioners could reconsider if they want to now go beyond the 4,000 up to 8. But Mark indicated that's still a lot of acres.
Still, yeah.
You said that last week, and then you're bringing that again. I don't disagree.
especially with it, and I understand one county can have multiple solar farms. I'm just saying if the biggest solar field in the state of Kansas is 144 acres, I think everyone's educated here enough to know that there's a proposed solar farm in Linn County that would be 1,300 acres. So that's a huge difference in size. Is my worrisome from that. I just feel like you're skipping a lot of leaps and bounds there.
We're capping it at 500.
Mhm.
Is you paying a little penny?
You're still over double the largest one in the state of Kansas
You're right.
by far. But to get your feet wet, I mean, that's the only thing that worries me. I just feel like we're growing too fast, way too fast. And I think if it's that great of a deal for the county now, then if that works out, then it's going to be a great deal in 3 years or whenever. I just think that starting that big leaves you open for a lot of issues.
So Mark, I suggest that we park that tonight, because we got about an hour left and we got 2 pages worth of code to get through that I think people really want to know what we're doing. And let's not forget that. Let's bring it back when we got a little more time to work on that issue and leave it as an unresolved issue for now.
Yep.
You all right with that?
Yep.
All right, let's go to 14-408, toxic materials prohibited in solar panels. The correction of this is panels constructed with toxic materials such as lead and cadmium are prohibited. Any issues with that paragraph, that sentence?
You said on A there?
Yeah, 408A.
Yeah, I had a note. So it says such as lead and cadmium. I'm just making sure that that's not an inclusive list, that that's just meant to be representative examples.
I think the key is the, right before that, toxic materials, such as. So the key word is toxic materials. And here you see a couple of examples of what we're talking about.
Yep.
So I think you're right, it's not inclusive.
Yep, good.
All right, moving on. Number 1, finding the applicant has no feasible alternative to the use of toxic materials, and finding the applicant's operation and maintenance plan will avoid contamination of water and soil in the plan, will capture and remove toxic materials prior to any contact of surface water or groundwater in the event of panel failure or breakage, and that the applicant's plan for decommissioning shows the method for, the estimated cost of, ensuring the removal of all toxic materials from the soil, groundwater, and surface water. What say you about this?
I'd like to see an addition to this in response to 2. I'd like to consider adding item 3 underneath B. And the things that I'd like to talk about adding there would be provisions for soil or water toxicity sampling before construction, periodically during the operation of that site, whether that's semi-annual, annual, or biannual, as well as testing for after decommission, and then lastly, to set acceptable limits, whether that's 0 or some other number.
Are you talking about limits in the panel itself or in the groundwater?
Groundwater and soil, because that's what's referenced there in 2.
I have something to that. I think also, and that's something I'd read, so there's on some other regulations that I'd read, they had a clause or a regulation, I guess, stating if they had a broken panel that wasn't replaced in X amount of days, then they were required to test around that site.
That's a good idea.
I didn't think that was a bad idea. And along with that, this isn't the spot for it, but just so it brings it to everybody's attention, that when an incident would occur like that, they have 48 hours, there were 7 days, a lot of different deals to make a report to to the director of planning and zoning.
In I think it's Indiana or Douglas County, they have in their regulations a cause for extraordinary events, where within 3 days of an extraordinary event, the operator shall provide written notice of the event to the zoning and codes director, noting the cause and degree of damage associated with the event. 2, within 30 days of the event, the operator shall provide the zoning and codes director with a mitigation plan, noting the steps that they will take to mitigate any negative impacts. Additional mitigation steps may be required by the zoning and codes office. And that the solar facility shall be reviewed for compliance within the standards of the conditional use permit 1 year after release of certificate of occupancy and every 5 years thereafter through the life of the conditional use permit.
Where'd that come from?
Douglas County, Kansas. And I can send a copy of that to Darren to send over. But it kind of holds them accountable to stay on top of it, because according to Clearway, they're going to buy a building, they're going to put their own employees in it, and the 5 to 10 people will be there to oversee everything. But I think there needs to be oversight on top of that, because you can't just put it upon the company that put the panels in to regulate everything. You need to have a third-party oversight.
Company that may not want to spend their own dollars to correct a problem.
Yes, exactly.
Another thing that was brought up was they had said at that meeting that they had hired a company that would actually come out and fix or get the panel to recycle it. But they didn't know how often that would be. So I think leaving broken panels, there ought to be something,
Storage of a damaged.
there'd be something that we need to take care of there also.
It's no different than having a berm around your oil collection tanks or whatever.
Right.
It's the same kind of concept.
Also, I think it was mentioned in the proposed state regulations you sent over that there was, I think it was every 5 years, testing of streams and rivers that go through the property, and you test for every property surrounding the area. So we would probably use the 1,000 feet from the property that we used to notify people, and those would be the people that also get tested.
Well, and so I have a question in regards to the leases that have already been filed with the Register of Deeds, and these are primarily EDF around in our area. And the terms that they have with the homeowners of what they're gonna do when they come into the land and basically take over, drill wells, remove everything, strip everything, pull any, I mean, there's very specific verbiage in these. How binding is this if we don't address things in those that we don't like? I mean, I don't understand the idea of each property is going to have wells, several wells drilled into them. I'm not sure what the point of that is. That's my question.
I think I saw Barry back there. Can we ask him what the purpose of the wells would be?
He's not EDF.
I thought maybe you would know anyway.
I'm sorry. You don't want to speak for him?
I also think that your wells on your location would be like the wells that are drilled around the landfill to enable you sampling.
Right.
Those, they have to lower jars in and take samples out. So your wells are about 4 inch. That's the purpose of it.
When we were discussing the wind issues, there were several leases out there to lease land before we'd even written our code. And it was all based on what we ended up approving as code, whether some of the terms of the lease were enforceable or not. So I think it'd be the same thing. I'm not a lawyer. We don't have a lawyer here, or at least general counsel here, but I would think that none of that would be valid unless it followed along with the code that we eventually planned.
Yeah, I'm thinking.
Yeah.
CUP would never be approved if it was outside of that, irregardless of the lease.
Do they have to present it with the CUP, the leases that they have with the landowners?
No.
No.
We talked last meeting about not over-regulating and being too specific and the problems that can cause. You can't write a regulation for every single thing, so you just have to be pretty broad. I think the suggestions that she had in terms of the extraordinary event, as well as my suggestions about setting acceptable limits for toxicity and then spelling out exactly how often soil and water samples should be taken wouldn't be too cumbersome.
Okay.
Oh,
And I'll just tell you what Cap told us, and this is his last project. He was way past the time people normally retire, and so he had a lot of experience with this. And he says, if you want me to write a 200-page document, I can do that. And he says, I'll charge you for it, and you can have it. But he says, you really don't want that. You want something very succinct and to the point. And he says, that's what I'm going to deliver for you. And I think that was sound advice and sound practice. But I agree. I think we need a couple of additions, and Darren will capture those, and we'll, at some point, we'll go back and revisit that and see if it says exactly what we want it to say.
Okay.
Everybody okay with that? All right. C, any SECS having toxic materials in its solar panel components shall post at the perimeter of the permitted area and in a manner approved by the zoning administrator, signage listing all toxic materials at the SECS site, along with contact and emergency telephone and email information.
I guess before we go on that, do we need to talk about like the terms of when they would do the testing or what the requirements would be as far as like if there's a broken panel, how many days, or we're just gonna come back to that in general, I guess? Or if we require yearly testing or anything like that? Do you need any?
I think if we read through Douglas counties, that kind of covers all.
Mhm.
And you'll avail Darren to a copy of that Douglas County.
Absolutely. I'll send it to you.
Very good.
Okay.
Paul, I'd like to add to this, see that, materials, data sheets be on file with the county.
See, for me, and this is just me personally, because I've had heavy metal poisoning and it almost killed me. And so this is why I was so passionate about jumping in. And I know that people say there's no problem, but then what if there is a problem and something happens and we get sick? I think that there shouldn't be any toxic materials. I don't think there should be, that's my personal opinion. Because I was on death's door for 5 years and we didn't know why. It was heavy metal poisoning. But that's just one opinion.
Not having been able to read through all of this, do we have information on like how many pounds of the different toxic materials are gonna be on site per acre? Or anything like that? Because my guess, at least on the lead, I don't know about the cadmium, but I'm betting that every car out there has more lead in it than at least an acre, if not the entire plant will have. Because this is gonna be solder. And it's gonna be very sparse in where they use it. So it seems like we might be making a lot out of something that doesn't need to be making a lot out of as far as some of these. I don't have an objection to anything that's been proposed so far, but the putting the signage around there, I don't know about cadmium, right? I'm gonna have to do some research on that. But we don't have signage on every car that we're driving, and they all have that aspect, right? So that is a contained lead that we know it's not going to leach out. And it's just one of those things we say, this is fine. It's not going to be leached out, much like it is in these panels. The other toxic materials, I can't speak to.
So in the event that nothing happens, it would be phenomenal. What happens for me or any citizen here, that just minute thing happens and it starts making people sick? What are our recourses on that?
Well, that wouldn't be a minute thing. That'd be a big thing.
That'd be a huge thing.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not something that winning a multi-million-dollar lawsuit is going to restore your health.
No.
So, I understand what you're saying.
Because when we found out that it was going around our property, personally, we talked about moving. My doctor told me, get out of there. Because there's other things that go along, not just the toxic panels, but we've lived here and built our retirement home, and I don't feel it's fair that I have to move. But that's a personal decision that everybody has to make.
I caught the tail end of it. I'm sorry. I heard markings on every vehicle.
Yeah, so my statement was the fact that I don't know about the cadmium, right? But as far as lead in the panels, I'm guessing the only source of lead in the panel would be the solder. And the amount of solder in the panels, because it's going to be so significant that we probably have more lead in at least the battery in the parking lot, but every car might have more lead in it than every acre, if not the entire proposed site. And so it seems like there is a lot of.
Do you have knowledge about this?
I'm sorry, do we have any information about this?
Well, sure. I appreciate it very much. So, Emily, your point is well taken.
Thank you, Barry.
I think your point is also well taken about essentially the risk factor, and I think this document detected, lead everywhere. Lead is in every solder.
Could you speak up, please?
Sure. Lead is in every solder. So to the extent that we're all exposed to lead all the time, that is absolutely true. And if it's problematic, then we have to deal with it. But a solar farm is a very low relative. Again, you're absolutely correct. The amount of solder on a solar panel is minimus relative to the amount of lead you're exposed to on a daily basis. Everything that's soldered, literally everything. Everything. As far as cadmium telluride, the reason I provided this document to the committee, your reading is that it's short and it's direct and it speaks in layman's terms instead of providing scientific papers which are almost undigestible. I'd encourage people tonight to get, or whenever you would like to, if you look at this, what you'll find is that what's in the solar panel is not cadmium, which would be problematic, but it's cadmium telluride, which are two elements that are bonded together and don't unbond until they're at 2,500 degrees Celsius, which is 3,200 degrees Fahrenheit. And so to the extent the volume, you see on page 4, taking a photo on it, you can see that there are 3 nanometers, which is half the size of a red blood cell, or 300th the size of human hair. So that's the volume of this inert bonded cadmium telluride in the panels that we will be using because they're made in America. Meaning there's a macro level discussion about where solar panels are made. Solar panels that we would source would be made in America. They're made in Ohio by First Solar. And so I wanted to provide this information to the committee. It's a very serious topic, but we're confident, and I know that our panel suppliers are confident, because the public is much more, it's not 1970, it's not 1950, but we don't even understand the risk. We have a very astute world, thankfully. We share information all the time. You can't put something out in the field that's going to leach and create problems. And in the case of our project, we seek to build it on the former certified strip mine land. So we're talking about, on this earlier discussion about testing, we're open to testing. But for our project, we would be seeking a very specific protocol that takes into account a baseline layer of land that was previously strip mined and sits within 500 feet of the coal plant. There's a sentence in here which was a shock to me, quite frankly, coming from the Virginia Tech coal office. The greatest source of cadmium in the United States is actually coal plants. It's a heavy metal that goes up and comes down. So this county is exposed to a large amount of a bunch of nasty heavy metals through no fault of anybody. The solar project is totally benign relative to what we're in here tonight exposed to that. So I think that's something that we're very interested in working with the county on. This is a very serious topic, but I just wanted to provide as a baseline on this topics for the committee's consideration what our panels would utilize, which is
What happens if there's a fire?
so they don't.
But there have been fires on solar farms.
There
I'm not saying it's at the panel, but if there's a fire that starts.
You may remember during our open house, we had a panel on that. The flammable material in the solar panel is actually the wiring in the back, and it's actually the plastic that insulates the wiring. Panels themselves are virtually, you can go low part on the solar panel's not going to catch on fire. And these materials are designed to last in very harsh environments, stand up to hailstorms and everything else.
So the fire in New York, which was devastating. Right, at a solar.
We don't have any batteries in the site. We're not planning on building a battery in the site. So that's a great thing for everybody to know. Batteries are a different issue, and again, we're totally with you. If you have batteries and the industry has to get better about that, you need to be working with your fire department to make sure that the appropriate fire suppression system.
Don't you guys do that? Offer the training to the fire department, local fire
We
department?
do in places where we're doing battery development. This is not a project where we intend to build any batteries. If we did, we'd have to come back to an addendum to a conditional use permit. That would be a different use. So so we're not going to build. That is not a risk factor. This project, at least the project that we're proposing. I can speak to the
Right, yeah, right, yeah.
Out of curiosity, so you guys have a project in design of 1,300 acres. Roughly how many panels is that?
I don't know off the top of my head. I know it's about 320 megawatts of power output, but I don't know the number of panels. I'll find out for you.
So the 144 acres is spanning 75,000 panels. So
It may very well be a very old I mean, you mentioned it was co-op, and that to me sounds like a really pretty small project. The ratio is roughly 10 acres to 1 megawatt. You can get it down to 7, even 6 acres per 1 megawatt of output. So if they got let me say 140 acres, 144, so that'd be 14, maybe it's a 20 megawatt project, right? That's a really small project in the solar world. In the solar world,
It's the largest project in the city of Kansas.
well, I know actually, but Kansas, there's a Panasonic plant that's going up in, right, and that would be the largest solar project in America, outstripping Nevada and Arizona and all that stuff. So Kansas is actually a hotspot for solar development. So, you know, the world we see today is clearly changing.
So if you had to throw a number at 1,300 acres, it'd be 100,000 panels, a million panels.
I don't know, because I don't know, so I don't know how to convert acres to square feet. And then I'm not sure outside how big the panels are. Our panels tend to be about 4 feet by 3 feet. So
Mark, I'm trying to understand the number of acres versus the question or concern over the number of panels. You're just trying to calculate how many toxic vessels.
I'm just curious, because if you times anything by 3 million, I don't care how small the amount is, it helps. That's fine. But I think I'm just curious. It's been brought up a lot of times. Panels. So that was just my.
Yeah, I'm just trying to see where you're going with that. I mean, I'm sitting here in my head thinking of all the chemicals I spray in my pastures or whatnot, and it's 1.5 pints to the acre. How many acres are in Linn County getting the same thing? And none of us bat an eye at that because we know it's safe and we know that that small amount isn't going to matter in the grand scheme of things. At least we thought that until after he had problems. But I think it's the same general concept as what he's trying to communicate to us. That's how I'm justifying it in my mind.
Right.
Are your panels EPA tested?
oh, yeah. I mean, so the panels we purchased, I think called First Solar. So, but First Solar, and I would encourage everybody to go to First Solar's website.
This is the Ohio company.
It's the Ohio-based company that, they have, you can do feedback on all the testing materials, and actually, I'd be happy to provide to the committee a report that was much longer than this one. It is about 110 pages, done by the European Union a couple years ago. And they looked at the First Solar. This First Solar uses a thin film panel as opposed to polycrystalline, right? And so without monocrystalline panels, well, and then there's also polycrystalline. So they coexist with one on together. But thin film is a different technology. It does a little better. Thin film does a little better in higher humidity and higher heat stress conditions. So Kansas has hot, humid summer, so a good choice for us there. But I'm happy to come back next week or next 2 weeks or whenever the committee reconvenes with more detailed scientific information on all the testing that's done. But I would encourage you that Darren maybe be able to socialize the link. It's like a 30 megabyte document. Otherwise, I would encourage you to run it to everybody. But it goes through all the various testing. So again, importantly, hail. Hail is a very real thing in the Great Plains. We all live through hailstorms. For the committee's and the public's application, we have the panels on trackers, which allow us to then turn them vertical when a hailstorm is predicted, so that the hail as it comes down is hitting the frame of the panel and not the panel and cracking the panel. That's something that in the last 5 years our industry's gotten quite good at. So the very same thing that allows us to track the sun all day allows us to now evade the hail. It requires some programming changes, and it's a big deal in our little neck of the woods, but it's actually proven to be very effective at reducing crackage during hailstorms.
So it reduces, it doesn't eliminate. I mean, the side of my house got trashed by a hailstorm one time on the vertical basis.
I lost a whole car in high school, just destroyed my car. Big old hailstorm.
So it's a mitigating factor. It does not eliminate.
But that has shown like 98%
Sure.
improvement, and we
Yeah,
measure
guess-
actually insurance claims, but on it. One last point on this broader topic of panel replacement upon crackage, if there's a crack, and then storage of cracked panels on site. We make our money by selling electrons, and the electrons are only generated by panels that work. So if the panel is cracked, I mean, again, we will work with the committee and the county if there's a regulation on you need to pull it out for 3 days, 5 days, 2 weeks, or whatever for a cracked panel. Trust me, when we lose a panel or we lose a string of panels, we immediately get out there because our contract to sell power requires us to have functional panels. That's the business. And so if we lose a line, we've got all the people, and you know, to Ali's point, we 10 people, Emily, maybe he said, we will surge people into a project to ensure that they can be repaired as quickly as possible. And then, of course, we're not going to leave 100 panels just sitting on the ground. We want to get them out of there and move them. But if the county has a prescriptive approach to that, we're very open to working with you and listening and hearing what that might be. If they need to be stored indoors until they're hauled to the recycling facility or whatever. But just, you know, we're open to that. It's not particularly a big deal. But getting them off the rack if they're cracked and they're producing, that's core to our business. So that, I don't know that you need to be terribly prescriptive on that because we get that done quickly. Otherwise, we lose money. We have to go buy power off the open market to reimburse whoever we're selling our power to for the power that we didn't give them.
So,
That's much more expensive.
so if we included it in the regulations, we'll hurt your feeling one bit.
I just filling in some of the details on how we offer.
Right, right.
To answer your question, we'll be here next Wednesday. Okay, we're back to C.
With all of that is, there's more than just Clearway that we're gonna be regulating with these regulations.
They can be well intentioned, but we need to hold their feet to the fire through appropriate regulations that aren't over intrusive.
So we're on C. What do we want to do with it?
Somebody mentioned the material data sheet.
So material safety data sheet.
There you go.
Have that on file with Darren or with the county.
Okay?
Mhm.
All right, we ready to move to 409? Prime agricultural land. A, in order to conserve prime agricultural land, a SECS with a total permitted area of 160 acres or more shall not have more than 50% of its area constituted of prime ag land, except as provided in 14-409B. 14409B is right there. It's next. B is acreage of prime agricultural land within a permitted area and utilized for setbacks and buffers shall not be counted toward the 50% maximum of 14-409A. For example, a permit encompassing 160 acres, of which 40 acres is for setbacks and buffers, may have up to 100% of the 40 acres be prime agricultural land, and up to 50% of the balance of 120 acres, 60 acres, be prime agricultural land. So those A and B go kind of together. What say you?
I have a question, and it might be a Darren question, but it's, you start with prime agricultural land. You get a conditional use permit. If it's approved, is that land then have to be rezoned industrial?
Depends on the size. Because the commercial, we didn't have to, you don't have to rezone, but if it's the utility size,
Right.
it does.
And then once the project is over, does it then go back to prime ag land with it still being industrial?
Well, prime ag land is not a zoning qualification. It's something made up by the state and I think the federal government. That just designates which areas of a property are prime ag land. And so the general umbrella term is ag land. And so that doesn't just mean prime ag land.
Gotcha.
So the question still stands in my mind, once it's decommissioned, is the industrial zoning tied directly to conditional use and it reverts back to the ag zoning? Do you know that, Darren?
So if it's decommissioned, I think I don't know, I've never had to decommission anything.
Right, yeah. Maybe
but
taxed at different rates.
I think what it would be is, as it's decommissioning, zoning of the property would be in consideration
Gotcha.
of the decommissioning of it.
I know on the old P1 ground, it wasn't originally just straight back to ag, residential or anything like that, it's still industrial.
Some of it's still zoned industrial.
Some of it still is, yeah.
Emily, would there be concern if it stays zoned industrial, somebody else could swoop in by it and it's
Oh,
already?
no, I was just a question because, I mean, I don't know that there's been any decommissioned solar sites or wind farms to this date because it's a new thing.
Right.
So once it's decommissioned, will it be supposed to be returned to the existing now? So, I mean, that's more my concern is that it's returned to, and it's probably not the appropriate part in here to talk about it as far as putting it back into the same condition that it was.
I can see concern with that.
Yeah. It just came to me sitting here, so I'd be concerned about it too.
I guess the other thing is, and I don't know if anybody here knows it, what percentage of the county is considered prime ag land? Do you have any idea, Jeff?
I don't, I mean, it would be an assumption on my part that teaching land, judging land class 1 would be your prime ag land or whatever, that you're talking a slope of 0 to 1% to meet that designation. If it's classes 1 through 4 designated as ag land, then I believe that you still got a standard like a 5% slope. So you think about how our county lays or whatever, it's not as much as we would think it would be.
I just wondered with allowing, depending on how much of the county is prime ag, if it would control your 50% if you want more or less. That's something we should check with
Can you check into that, Darren?
USDA.
Should we have any restrictions on grading of property line?
I think so, and I'm not too sure if it was in here or not. I want to say it said minimal, but I might be wrong.
It does, if it's where was that at?
I thought it was 2%.
With having some of the old peanut ground, that's probably one of the biggest issues we have is the reclamation of it, some of it, because there's some spots you may have 6 foot of topsoil. There's some places you have 1 inch of topsoil. So if they go in and grub everything off and push everything to one side, potentially in the long run, you could run into an issue.
Mhm.
So it could meet the eye test, it'd look the same, but if the soil's not distributed back in a similar manner.
Right.
But would you have to go and test? I mean, they would have to pretty much have test sites.
So there's actually some books that were made from the 70s that show every acre in Kansas and every soil type and the depth of topsoil and the subsoil or whatever. So those maps are spot on. I don't know how they did it, but they are right. So that'd be easy information to have on a site-by-site basis for the commissioners to review.
And there's a website.
Yes, there is web soil survey.
And I said this before, but we need a definition. We don't have a definition. Prime ag.
Oh,
I got hung up on prime ag land for a while. I mean, I think as a steward, you only own the property in so much as you're taking care of it, but you want to leave it so the next generation after that has it in good shape too. But if it's prime ag land and it's full of solar panels, and then when it's decommissioned, it has to be put back to the way it was, that really removes that concern for me. But how does that fit in with the comprehensive plan for the county and what we want our county to look like? That's kind of a different way of thinking about it.
David, I'm looking at section 601 and letter H. I wonder if that addresses your grading question. Measures to address mitigation of dust, smoke, and other construction-related impacts which could escape the permitted area.
I actually says grading right below it.
Oh, okay.
Grading.
Amount of topsoil to be removed and stockpiled.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Alrighty, are we okay with prime ag land?
I have a question.
You want to speak?
I don't want to speak.
Yeah.
I would really like to have a definition on the prime ag land too, because a lot of the land that these leases are on are industrial, because they never rezone it back to agricultural, especially like my dad's land, like when he did the can and coal mining thing, they never rezoned that. I mean, they run cattle, multiple things. So I have a question on that. So I would really like that to be addressed. Also, when they go in, if it's prime ag, and they put solar panels, and then we rezone it to industrial, and then it's industrial, so then if someone new comes in, it's industrial, it's not prime anymore, and so then how much do you allow, or is that not?
The
Prime is not
industrial,
zoning.
not the ground will still be, it'll still be prime part ground, because it's USDA that actually categorizes the dirt.
It's a soil designation. It has nothing to do with the zoning.
Okay.
So even if it's
It's not
industrial,
really in there.
How fit is it to be ag?
More research, I guess. It doesn't really state that, but I guess you just know that.
Let's make a note when we look at the decommissioning part that we have a discussion about if it refers back to agriculture or whatever the previous zoning designation was prior to the CUP approval.
I found on the USDA website a definition. This, I think, doesn't say where this is from, but it's looks to be updated fairly recently. The definition: prime farmland or ag land is land that has the best combination of physical and chemical characteristics for producing food, feed, forage, fiber, oil, and oilseed crops, and that is available for these uses. It is the combination of soil properties, growing season, moisture supply needed to produce sustained high yield crops in an economic manner that it is treated and managed according to acceptable farming methods. And it goes on to.
And they have classifications of soil, like class 1 and class 2, which is kind of a common theme through some of the regulations. So I think that has something to do with the classifications.
I used to know that off the top of my head for my degree, but it's blanking on me now.
As far as having a definition for it, I don't know how much you want to define it when it's either the USDA or the
There's a National
Pharmaceutical
Soils.
Agency Center or whatever is the ones that actually classify the prime ag land. So it may just be a note to refer to them.
Also, there's maps made by the National Soil Survey Center that produce one. I sent that to Darren, so hopefully he'll send that out to you.
You're exactly
Yeah,
right. It's just,
there's a map on the county website that shows all the prime ag land.
you're exactly right. We just need something that we're not pulling that phrase out of thin air.
Right.
Because, if they come and say, can we build here, or can we build here, or why can't we build here? Or we reduce the percentages, be able to say because of this. And so, yeah, we just need something in the definitions to point us to what we actually mean.
So some thoughts, and this may not be the appropriate time, but we're talking about the land. When you're dealing with the wildlife area, they have talked about having a 5-mile radius ban around them with the solar farms. I mean, do we need to take in consideration that you have the Kansas federal and state wildlife down there surrounding this area?
I think I'd be back in setbacks.
Setbacks?
Yeah.
Okay.
Be a lot of people say, yeah.
All right, let's move away from prime ag land and go to 14.-5, site plan. Okay. I don't know how you want to tackle this section. It's got A through R. I guess I'd call for somebody that has issue with one of the letters, the sentences in one of the letters. I mean, it's really,
The two things that I wrote down as notes for this was a question about where is the setback distance at, but that's actually somewhere else in the zoning regulations, I believe.
right.
So that answered that question. And then the other is their mention of wildlife corridors and other places in the regulations.
We did have a mention of it, but we removed that. But I would like to add that again. I've been doing some research on wildlife fencing and wildlife quarters. I know we were talking about.
So we need just a middle note or your own note when we get to that section. Now, I'm sure you will not forget it.
Well, the reason I think it fits in the site plan section is if once proposed in your neighborhood, I guess you want to call it that, you're going to want to look at the site plan. And having the wildlife corridor denoted as part of the site plan would be useful information for you to form an opinion for or against it. So I would like to see inclusion of any wildlife corridor, not a requirement, but if a wildlife corridor is to be included on any given proposed project, that it be listed on the site plan. And under letter Q, it says an inventory of any existing wildlife, endangered flora and fauna species, and biologically sensitive areas. I think it would fit nicely there.
As part of Q.
Yes.
So what we took out was 14,410, originally, and it goes through all of wildlife corridors. And, so I can get that out so everybody can read it. It's actually right above, it would have been 14,410, so it would have been right above site.
Okay.
So you get that out to all of us. Okay. David, anything from your copious notes?
No, I missed that one. No. Not on that section. I do like the wildlife thing though.
Yeah.
I miss it.
Just to double check, since I have notes both ways, the 2 feet on G, the 2 feet versus 10 feet has come up a couple times. I thought this settled on leaving it alone
We did.
on the site plan. Am I in the right spot?
That's what,
Yeah.
Yes.
Contours at intervals of 2 feet.
I am
that's
bouncing all
what
over.
Andy talked about, right?
Yeah, as far as I know, you don't really use paper maps anymore. Okay, so that's not really a problem. You just zoom in, of course, and so you're good.
Zoom
might-
out your
Yeah, with
View,
your,
yeah.
GIS and all that. With paper maps, that would be an issue because you would just have like a black mass of lines. But
So we're okay with the 2 feet.
I have a question on I, where it talks about waterways, water courses, lakes, ponds, wetlands, drainage districts, and other natural features within the boundaries of the area and 500 feet from the exterior boundaries. I would like to see, I mean, this is what this is, but I think that there needs to be something in there saying that there needs to be surface water drainage patterns. Because if you're sticking, I mean, we have a lot of creeks and streams and you're sticking all this stuff in here, you need to know where the current drainage is and how that's going to affect it.
Another thing with that is if we're gonna be requiring soil testing for the 1,000 foot around it, I would imagine we would want that not be 500 from exterior boundaries, it would be 1,000.
yes, because if we already need to know what is going on with the waterways, we need to know where they are and.
Right.
So, KDHE will go out and test the ground, and they will set regulations for us to go for surface water, where it runs to. They've got to build a retention pond somewhere to let the water go to. So KDHE will play a part of that.
You know, do they have any regulations on how much they can grab off at one time?
I don't know the answer to that, but I can call them and ask them.
I'm curious of that, just because you go in and open a 200 acre site or 1,000 acres, your runoff changes dramatically.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I know we have some requirements on job sites, but I don't know if it's KDHE.
We put in residential swimming pools and it is a major issue just in a backyard. So I know that the hoops that we have to jump through to provide site maps and whatnot, I can't imagine 500 acres of solar panels.
So we okay move the 500 feet to the 1,000 feet? That seems like prudent thing to do.
Keep it
Okay,
consistent.
all right. What else? Hearing none, let's move to 14-6, construction management plan. Let's kind of handle that the same way. What are your concerns with anything in that section? A through I.
Last time Dan talked about a resident project representative. Is that something we need to ask for in this plan?
I'm sorry,
Dan talked about a resident project representative. So somebody that's on site, managing the project. Remember that, Paul?
Yeah, an advocate that he has on his commercial projects
Yeah.
to oversee, on behalf of the owner.
you're talking about Danny McCullough.
No.
Oh, Danny, okay.
Like a third-party inspection.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah, I think, yes, it'd be third party, right? Yeah.
Yeah, be third-party inspection.
I don't know. He seemed to have a pretty good grasp on how we would write that.
Okay.
He sent me verbiage on it.
Did he? Okay.
Yeah, I just haven't had, this week's been crazy and I haven't had time to get it out.
Okay, so noted, it's being worked on with Dan and Darren as we speak.
Okay.
On C, do we want to list out the silt fences and other temporary erosion controls, or just put that they have to comply with KDHE for the SWIFT application?
You know, will that,
KDHE is gonna probably put quite
They would
restrictions
be
on
more
it.
than we would ever put.
Right, and whatever they turn into KDHE is gonna have to be turned into us also. So if we find something in that KDHE put out, we can question it and we can go stricter than KDHE if we choose to. But it'll be covered probably under KDHE's stuff.
So it talks about the schedule of when the installation and the construction will be. And it says that they have to have a schedule of the hours and the days of the week. Should that not be set by, I don't want them out there. It's a very loud process when they're doing it. I've seen the videos on it. So, can we go to 8, 9 o'clock at night working?
that's something we would typically handle when the CUP is presented. And we'd address all those issues and make that conditional, that one of the conditions of that conditional use permit. So I think we're well covered with that one.
So I would think that would kind of depend on where it is. If it's right next, well, if you can see another house from there and it would be affecting the lights and whatnot, then it would be, or earlier, of course. And then if it's in the middle of nowhere where the nearest house is a mile away, it's a little less important.
So the way it's stated, they have to submit their plan of what that will look like. That would be one of the discussion points. And
We would have to
resident
agree
would
on
be able to be heard. You would know what their proposed plan is if you lived beside it. If you took issue with that, you could ask for a concession.
Just like we had a camping setup a couple of months ago where we had to agree on how late they could have the lights on and how late they could make noise. And so we would more lengthy process than that, but essentially the same.
Right.
And that's why the use permit's called a conditional use permit. Yep. Okay. Anything else on this section? Well,
Would we mention the any type of wildlife fencing in the fencing surrounding the property while it's being installed?
What do you think? Probably not a bad idea.
Yeah, I also have a question. So they do, so I don't know. Some of these sites that I've researched into do a 8 or 10 foot tall woven wire fence, and some do not. Is that any type of regulation that we feel like we want to stick our necks out on or not? Just thinking, if they go to an 8 or 10 foot tall fence, you're limiting movement of any wildlife.
Talking about after the project's
And I live
completed.
next to a high fence, so I know what that is.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Are you talking about after it's done, it's
Yeah,
operational? How are they protecting the perimeter?
Yeah.
Is there anywhere that specifies there has to be a fence right now in these
Well,
regulations?
E says fencing, but it doesn't necessarily say what that is. It just says,
It's temporary and that's just for the construction
what
process.
is that?
I thought we had something in there
Site?
about fencing.
Yeah, there's fencing in there somewhere.
Yeah,
Fair point. I mean, construction
That
that I've
around
seen, it's
the
usually around
construction
potentially
regular-
dangerous, open pits,
Yeah, well-
electrical.
They don't do that around highways.
No, they don't.
I mean, I drive in the city a lot and there's significant drop-offs in there and they don't have fencing around any of that stuff and that's considered, you know, course.
A lot of
Part of
case,
the course.
yeah, a lot of case laws set up fencing. If someone wanders onto your property and gets harmed, then you're liable for it if you didn't fence that out. And so that's where the fencing is. It's a safety issue and protection for liability for the contractor more than anything. If you look at the existing KCP&L substations, I have one right across the street from my old house. They're all surrounded because of the electrical danger.
I think Barry has a comment.
But if you- And then any electric generation unit in the United States has to have this, right?
Okay.
That's a federal requirement.
Yep.
So, and this gentleman's point here about the high fence and again, the area that we proposed project. I think our expectation to provide that, wildlife movement by removing, part of the bottoms of those fences in the spaces so that wildlife can move through that area in a way that they can't now, actually. So, that's where we are thinking at the moment on that issue, but, that's just, you're absolutely right. You have to have a fence for that unit in the United States. They're regular.
Do they have regulations on exactly what type of fence, like what size of length?
Well, that's actually a really good question because that's evolving. It used to just be chain link, right? Just, 2 inch by 2 inch chain link. And now there's more discretion, so you are getting more because of the visual impact. You can get 6 by 6, 4 by 4 square, and it doesn't necessarily have to be on metal, it can be on wood. So there's more discretion there, but the bottom line is you have to secure your project. And so it's how tall? How tall? It varies. Yeah, usually 6 minimum. I don't recall seeing a 10-foot requirement anywhere in the US, so it's probably 6 inches, but it's good.
It's gonna be more than what deer's gonna jump, right? So you work in.
Nope,
On depth, you can work.
not in my garden. Watched it happen.
But we, in the native street development, there's a lot of deer and there's a lot of wildlife movement. We can develop, working with county experts, the State Department, generally State Department of Environment and Wildlife, the appropriate methodology for the animals to be able to, any wildlife, be able to continue to get out free movement. Sure. And again, in the spot where we're looking to develop, it's already impediment to some of the movement going, anything, basically east to west with that high fence there. So I think in our case, we seek to actually improve, wildlife, migratory. So that's, we think that's possible.
I wouldn't mind to let someone look over my. I just think with the fencing, I think it's huge to Linn County. It's detrimental when somebody does do that to land because then the surrounding land, it's a sad thing to watch, I guess. I'm just, we see it a lot. So I think wildlife corridors is huge, but also free movement of not being high fence to the ability of a deer to be awesome to see.
How much of the proposed 1,300 acre site would likely encompass fenced off areas?
Another good question. I think, for our open house, and I'm trying now to call the poster, I may actually.
I have it on my phone.
Yeah, so when we think about the footprint, we think about sort of the maximum footprint and then how much of that is actually occupied by animals.
Yep.
When you start laying them out, You got the buffer requirements here, you've got vegetation screening requirements. So again, off the top of my head, it's not, certainly it's not the entire footprint that we've leased. It's us. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, no, this is, you know, so for instance, you'll note the orange here is a draft plan for where solar panels will be placed. All of this is the same landowner. And that would continue to just be in ag. Actually, I think in his case, that's where it's, that's cartoon.
It counts against the requirement, but it continued to be cropped or
Correct.
grazed.
It
or
counts
whatever.
against the requirement,
Okay.
but it continues to be utilized as agricultural land. And so,
That's part of the 50 acre.
Yeah.
Or 50% of the.
Right. Yep.
And maybe that's not this, really for the regulation part, it's not a place for it, it's more this is listing what it would be.
Can they go in and the existing ponds and streams and everything, are they left alone or can they be filled in?
I believe waters of the,
Okay, just making sure.
some really nasty regulations about that. They're pretty limited. Waters of the UF, WAS, what it's called.
Any other issues, A through I? In section 6.
I guess, I believe, Andy Mayhew brought up doing the dust control. I think he had something on that.
Right now it reads, measures to address mitigation of dust, smoke, and other construction-related impacts which could escape the permitted area. I like that. I mean, that,
This had something to do with ingress and egress roads and.
I think that would be part of the, road use agreement.
Obviously, they'll have to maintain it, keep it clean and all that. I mean, and that's part of the road use agreement, so it's really, doesn't need no coverage.
Yeah, and in the road use agreement, you can, determine routes that they have to take. You can only take this road to get to your site. And if you're cut off that road, there'll be fines because your trucks are not on the designated route.
Sense.
okay, we've reached the end of 14-7, which is where we want to end up tonight. Coincidentally, we're finished up at 8:30-ish, which is our other goal. We need to talk about next week. We can start with 14-7, and how far do you want to get? And we spent about an hour tonight just talking about other issues. I mean, we only spent an hour or so working on the,
14.7 is pretty extensive.
Yeah.
Yeah, and do we want to revisit the project acreage cap? You said we were to table it today, as far as circling back to that.
that's true. Yeah, we need to do that.
For an individual site, yeah.
Yeah,
I think it might not hurt. I know sometimes talking about this, it brings everything to light. Sometimes there's an issue or something that somebody might want to read into. So maybe we can do like a little recap every night, you know, just to say, hey, was there anything anybody kind of, because I know there's things I'll think of and then I'll read something like, yeah, well, that's fine. Or like the acre
Yeah.
thing, it made me think about it.
Yeah.
Just a quick recap.
I think that's a great
And
idea.
everybody's mind's fresh. I think it'd be better. Obviously, if we get done in this in 6 weeks or however it works, if there's something somebody wants to go back to, that's great. But if we can kind of stay caught up, we're fresh with it.
I'm just making myself a note to include that in. I think that's excellent suggestion.
So the drawing that you had, Emily,
yeah,
on your phone.
Uh-huh.
Is there information on, and I know that this is not specific to the proposed, parcel? Is that?
The universal public.
Clear rights.
or do you want me to forward it to Darren so you have it?
That'd be great.
That's not a problem.
Something, yeah. If we do go forward with this as a county, I think if we want this to be a success for everybody, the person has to work if we're gonna do it, right? If the person goes south, then pretty much, it's
Everything
gonna be bad for everybody involved. And then it can be, if we do later decide that it worked, and we want to go forward, it becomes the standard to which everybody else has to live up to, so.
Well, there's multiple leases, not just Clearway, and, I mean, they may not be the first one, just FYI. Something else, public knowledge, I went to register the deeds and was looking at these, and there is some stuff for, and I'll pull it up and look for sure. Battery storage or energy storage, and I don't think our regulations has much in that, so that may be something everybody needs to be thinking of. There is a lease in Linn County for it.
That'd be tied to solar energy conversion systems.
I would think so.
And I've pulled somebody else's regulation on battery storage. I just figured I'd bring it up last after we got through all
Okay,
this.
that's fine, that's good.
All right, so we'll start with 14-7, and we got to do a recap next week. These are pretty intense discussion items I think we'll have, so what's realistic to get covered? This is the goal.
Hopefully 14.7 and maybe 14.8.
Yeah, I think.
Pretty short.
14.7 we want to cover for sure. If we've got time, let's knock out 14.8. An option.
So come prepared for 8, knowing that we may or may not
Right.
get to it. Okay.
Okay. I tell you what, we're making good progress. Okay. Anything else to go to the order? I said last time, I'll say it again, appreciate all the hard work. I think we were doing pretty well at finding the common ground. We'll see where all this goes eventually, and thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, we'll see you all next week, same time, same place.
That's not
Drive safe,
I will.